Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. The purpose of the show is to build a world with better bosses, and we do that by learning from the greatest minds in leadership today. Whether you're new to leadership or a seasoned pro, you'll get practical insights to help you lead with confidence. This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, Cadre of Men, and Pharaoh Skincare. Check out the show notes for links to all of our sponsors and my books. Today, we're talking about how to lead a team of tough, rugged bastards, and I'm honored to be joined by Marine Corps Task Unit Raider veteran John Dailey. When the global war of terror started after 9/11, John was called in to help build the Marine Corps Special Operations Command for deployment to Iraq. He built and led a team of tough men in a rugged wartime environment. Now, I was fascinated with his stories of leadership and combat, and I know that these stories will inspire you in your own personal leadership journey. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by John Dailey. John spent more than 20 years in the Marines, mostly in special operations. When the Twin Towers went down, Dailey was in Australia with his platoon, and he knew immediately that things would never be the same. He was handpicked to be part of Detachment One, the Marine Corps' newly formed Special Operations Command in the early days of the war on terror. He is the author of Tough, Rugged Bastards, where he tells the story of the creation, training, and volatile 2004 Iraq deployment of Task Unit Raider that led to the creation of the Marine Corps Special Operations Command. And I'm excited to have him on the show to hear his story and learn from his experiences. So, John, welcome to the show.
John, thanks for having me.
It's great to meet you, and I'm really excited to hear your story and your experiences. But first of all, tell us a little bit about your backstory. What was your life like in the Marines before 9/11?
Yeah, I joined right out of high school, so I couldn't kind of get out of my West Virginia hometown quickly enough. But I had wanted to be a Marine since as long as I could remember. So I joined as an infantryman. Had the good fortune to very early be kind of moved over into a sniper platoon, which was kind of the next step. Um, on the ladder, and then as a young sergeant moved into force reconnaissance, and that was really at that time the epitome of what you could do in the Marine Corps in the special operations realm. Although we were not assigned to the United States Special Operations Command, which was always a point of contention when we worked with the SEALs or worked with the Army Special Forces. But so I had had the opportunity to really kind of cut my teeth in force recon from being a point man on a team to a team leader, and then eventually on that 2001 deployment, I was the platoon sergeant for a platoon of 30 Force Recon Marines.
Yeah, and so 9/11 happens. You're in Australia. Tell us a little bit about that. When it happened and how, right away you knew there's going to be a difference in the work that you did, and tell us a little bit about that story because it's
Yeah,
very interesting.
absolutely. So yeah, we had our first real stop on the deployment was Darwin, Australia, and we were training with some Australian snipers. And in those days, the kind of the post first Gulf War days, you would every 6 months a Marine unit would go on ship, sail around and mostly in the Gulf and do a lot of training, get to see the world. Is really a great time. On this occasion, like I said, we had been training. It was our first night that we had any time off. So the younger Marines in the platoon were out doing what young Marines do, and along with the other 5,000 Marines that were on the ship, um, myself and the three team leaders that I had gone to a little sports bar, basically a little Irish pub in Darwin, Australia, and the soccer game was on television. We were kind of just talking, and suddenly the soccer game went off, and it was the towers. And we knew that was the reason that the Marine Expeditionary Unit deploys, right, is to be a force in readiness in the event that something happens. So we knew immediately that we were going to get back on the boats and go to somewhere, and that somewhere happened to be Afghanistan.
Mm.
So by November, we were in Afghanistan. Um, the first Marine unit on the ground, and we're really there for the kickoff of the GWAT.
Wow. Wow. And at that point, were you still in the same type of role that you were in prior to 9/11, or when did the formation of the Det One come about?
That didn't happen until after that. So once
Okay.
9/11 happened, all right, so it was still 2001, November 2001, we were in Afghanistan. And about that time, the Secretary of Defense at the time was Donald Rumsfeld. And I think he recognized that there was going to be a greater need in this global war on terror for more special operation forces. So he directed the Navy to make more SEALs, the Army to make more Green Berets, and told the Marine Corps had opted out of providing force recon to the United States Special Operations Command when it formed in 1987. So the Marine Corps has never been especially fond of having anybody that considers themselves different or special. As you know, it happened in World War II when the Marine Raiders there were formed. There was a lot of backlash, and they only lasted for about 2 years. So there's
Hmm.
always been within the Marine Corps, and rightfully so, considers itself to be the world's elite fighting force. And because of that, there's angst if there's the belief that any unit thinks they're above the rest of the rank and file Marine Corps. And I don't think that's with special operations, that's not the case. It's simply that there's a, very particular skill set that's necessary to execute that mission. But by the time we returned from Afghanistan in early 2002, the writing was kind of on the wall that the Marine Corps was being directed to form a special operations unit. And the man that was tasked with that had been my former commanding officer, a man by the name of Colonel Robert Coates, and he came up to me. I'd heard about it obviously, and everybody was kind of just hoping they would get like the tap on the shoulder that he and it undoubtedly had somewhat to do with my platoon and their performance in Afghanistan. So we were the first Marines to really engage enemy combatants, since the early 90s. Um, and some Somalia and things like that. But the first, really, the opening shot of the Gulf War was our Marines on a roadway between uh, Kandahar and Lashkar in Afghanistan. So we did a lot of vehicle interdiction and took out a lot of Taliban convoys. So upon our return, I got the tap on the shoulder, and Colonel Coates asked if I would like to be a part of this unit, and that's I've said it's like a guitar player being tapped and say, hey, do you want to be part of the Rolling Stones? It's of course you do.
Yeah.
All right. It was just an amazing feeling to realize I was one of four Marines who was being picked to lead a team in this new organization. So it was daunting to say the least.
Well, to explain that, because I think people might be surprised to hear that you were, it's like you were getting picked to be the lead guitarist in a, in a great rock band or what have you. That you, because I remember during the first Gulf War, I was deployed during that time, and then when we heard that there was a U.S. submarine that got involved and actually shot missiles in the first Gulf War, all of us were just jealous because we're like, and that could be us, right? Because a submarine hadn't fired in anger since World War II. So, to know that was this historic moment and I was on a different submarine was like
Yeah.
frustrating to me. So tell us a little bit about, like, because some people might think, well, you don't want to get picked for these kind of roles because they're very dangerous. But when you're in the Marines, when you're in the military, you get trained. You're trained. You want to go do the things that you've been trained to do, right? What was going through your mind at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think particularly when you seek out that level of force reconnaissance and things, your level of training that you get is phenomenal. I mean, you're among the best trained in the world. So it's like being, sometimes I use the analogy of being a pitcher, a third, fourth string pitcher that never ever gets called into a game. All right. So you never know if you've really got what it takes. So um, I had the first Gulf War I missed out on. I was serving at an embassy duty in Buenos Aires, which Buenos Aires was really nice, good time, but I really felt that I had kind of been shortchanged. Um, I was supposed to go. We were initially scheduled to go in Somalia when that kicked off, and they decided to send another unit instead. So I really felt that I kind of had the bad luck, or something. So when we went to Afghanistan, even minutes before the first firefight that we got into, I was kind of, telling guys that, hey, I'm like a bullet repellent. Nothing's going to happen because I've obviously, had these opportunities pass me by so many times before. But yeah, for this unit, Detachment One, being selected to be a part of that was everything you could ever dream of, and it
Yeah.
was absolutely recognizing the sorts of missions that we were going to be assigned. We're going to be now special operations level missions, so we're going to be going after um, what we called high value targets. So there was the deck of cards
Yeah.
that the 52 top, Iraqis that we were going after those level of guys, going after bomb makers, financiers, cell leaders, and things like that. So absolutely a very dangerous tasks, but it definitely gives you the opportunity to prove that you deserve to be there and that you're to put the training that you spent years and years. At this point, I had been in Afghanistan. I had been in the Marine Corps for 14 years. So without really hearing too many shots fired in anger, and not firing any back. So, that's, I think that's the reason that most people that join the Marine Corps
Yeah. Yeah. No,
to see if
absolutely.
see if they have what it takes to see if
Yeah. Yeah. You want to test yourself, against history, right? I mean, so many Marines for so many years have done so many, heroic things. Do you have what it takes when comes down to it? What were the kind of people they were looking for to be part of Detachment One? So how did they recruit? And then what was the training like for those that got assigned to this unit? Because it wasn't very big, right?
No, it was of the reconnaissance element, the kind of the operators they would be called now. There were only about 30 of us, so we were about the size of a force recon platoon.
Wow.
Then we had an equivalent, about a 30-man intelligence unit, and so they were, we went out and found the best intelligence guys, and in many cases we were bringing them back from the national, NSA and guys who had been assigned to the CIA and places like that. So they were really the best, the cream of the crop of intelligence in the Marine Corps. And their contribution was enormous. But and then we had probably another 30 or so kind of Marines from all kind of walks of life. So, administrative people, communications people, our air controller for JTACs, former short terminal air controllers, logistics people down to the whole nine yards. But to pick the men within the actual operators or shooters, as a team leader, I was given the opportunity, which was never ever happens, to pick my team. So I had six Marines. I was gonna, get to pick, or seven, myself and six. I got to pick them. And the first morning when I kind of reported before the unit had officially stood up, Colonel Coates, who was, like I said, the commander, called me into his office and said, "Hey, I went by the nickname Ranger. So I'd been to Army Ranger School earlier in my career, and it stuck. So he's like, "Hey, Ranger, you know what I expect? I expect, nothing but the best. You're going to be able to pick your guys, but I want them all to be tough, rugged bastards, with strong backs and hard feet," is his exact. And when I left his office, I wrote it down, and then, and this is 2003. I was like, man, if I ever write a book, it's going to be called Tough Rugged Bastards. And so I had to do a little bit of the publisher wasn't, they're like, oh, I don't know, that might turn some people off. Like, man, I need to kind of draw a hard line here. That's, I promised this to myself 20 years ago. Um,
Yeah.
so we were only picking from, known quantities, right? People that we'd worked with. So everybody was coming with a pretty known level of training. And, we really had about a year to fully uh, work together before we were going to deploy. So, we were able, kind of knowing that a lot of times in the military, every time you get a new group, and it's the same thing in the civilian, workforce, you've got to go back to ground zero and start again and start building. Fortunately, we were able to realize that, hey, everybody's, already operating at the, 85, 90, 92% level. So we can start there and go forward. So we were able to, really get ourselves to a level of proficiency that I had never been at, that I don't think any of us had ever been at. And we, almost, without fail, anytime you have a collection of people, you're going to have a couple of weaker links, right? Some people that you got to keep an eye on, particularly in the military. I've got to keep watching this guy. When you don't have that, when everybody are, you're questioning, it's hard to lead in some ways a group like that because they're just supreme heavy hitters. But it also is made very, very easy to lead them because
Mm.
they don't require a lot. They require, kind of point them in a direction and let them go. And the one lesson that I really learned is that, in leadership, there's you've when you're working with people who are incredibly competent, you've got to challenge them, right? You've got to give them the opportunity to grow. You've got to give them the opportunity to take charge of things. It's got to be their own thing. So when we arrived in Iraq, I had, one guy was the vehicle guy. Hey, you're responsible for our vehicles. Make sure they're always ready to go. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but I'm going to have you tell me how you did it. All right, just so I'm, I am responsible for that. I'm responsible for making sure the things are done, but you kind of figure it out. Another guy was responsible for all of our explosive breaching charges. You build them, you figure them out, just, show me what you've done. And, anytime you have the opportunity to, give somebody a area of responsibility that um, and when you do that, they'll dig into it and they'll learn more about it than you ever will. So they're eager to come and, tell you about it. They're eager to come in and share that, hey, I was practicing with blowing doors and I found this out. We can use less explosives but get a better effect. Um, so it's, definitely a leadership lesson that I learned there is that you've got to, your leadership has to reflect the people that you lead.
Mm. What's interesting is in a case like this, right? So you're recruiting an elite team, right? And I would imagine, one of the challenges with that sometimes could be that you have, an all-star team basically. And we've, the stories throughout history is where all-star teams aren't, they don't actually become a team. So how did, I was trying to just thinking through, was it automatic that the team gelled because the mission was so clear and they knew this was elite group, or was it through the training and workups where you kind of developed camaraderie and you became a team? Was there some point where you said, oh yeah, this is a team now, it's not just a bunch of all-stars?
Yeah, I think that so we had initially four teams, and I think that our platoon sergeant was kind of brilliant in a way that he pitted us against each other. He put us in positions where we had to come together as a team in order to beat the other teams, at whatever it might be. Early on, although we were a special operations unit training for a really important mission, we had no equipment. Right, we had we were living in borrowed buildings. We had no weapons, no anything. So one of the few things, everybody owned their own rucksack, because that's what you do. You're a reconnaissance Marine. That's your, main piece of equipment that you need. So everybody had their own, rucksack. We would go out, every Thursday and do a 20-mile, hike through the mountains. And that would always turn into a team on team challenge at the end. So at the end, you may find, 3 miles from the end, uh, a truck tire, and each team had to get a truck tire down the beach. And it it didn't. So we didn't necessarily gel as the four teams, but we really really gelled as individual teams. And that was, I think, I questioned it initially, because I'm like, man, we're really four very, very disparate teams, four different team leaders, four different ways of doing business, and we're going to have to work together. But I think what he saw was that, hey, we've got to get really tight as individual units first, and then we can work on expanding that. And that's what happened. I think by the time we were absolutely unified around a mission. So not only the missions that we were going on, but the realization that this was the first Marine Corps unit being assigned to U.S. Special Operations Command, and the future of a Marine Corps Special Operations Command was contingent on our success.
Mm.
So I think that did a really good job of kind of distilling a lot of things down for us. So there were absolutely disputes between teams, and hey, who should get to go on this mission, who should get the lead. But it really came down to the recognition that, hey, who's going to be the best, for this particular mission.
So you ended up in Iraq in 2004. Tell us a little bit about that. What was it like when you got in country? And then how soon to you got operations, and what was it like, conducting those early operations?
It was unique. We in most cases you'll arrive and do what's called a RIPTO, or a relief in place. So another unit is there, you show up and you take over their area of responsibility, and they turn over, what they're doing to you. Because we were the first of our kind, we were deployed underneath the Naval Special Warfare Task Group, so a Navy SEAL boss, and they wanted to be able to keep somewhat of a close eye on us. So we were located situated out of Baghdad, and had not been another SEAL team, which we were kind of replicating in Baghdad. So we arrived, and where normally you would have target folders handed over, hey, here's targets that we were working on. We really didn't have that, so we had to rely on our intel Marines, and they were phenomenal. So their ability to pour you through just pages and pages and pages of intel reports. Um, One of the first mission that we did was incredibly unique. But one of our intel Marines had identified that there had been a number, like 17 Iraqi interpreters who were working with the U.S. that had been killed, executed essentially over the span of several months all across Iraq. And he started digging into it just kind of on his own, and figured out that there was one interpreter that was connected to all of them.
Mm.
And so the first mission and that interpreter was a female. So the first special operations mission that was launched by the Marine Corps was given to me. So I led it. I had a Navy SEAL with me, one of our human exploitation Marines. And because it was a female, we had borrowed from the Polish Special Operations Force. They had a female operator. Um, so we wind up driving all over Baghdad, middle of the day, in civvies, in civilian clothes, and you know, sedans, unmarked sedans, just driving around, and finally just kind of chasing this lady until we ultimately find her. Um, are able to bring her back, and when we start to interrogate her, they quickly realize that she was responsible for the deaths of these 17
Wow.
interpreters, but unwittingly. So she had, a gentleman had, met her, hit on her, kind of befriended her, and then started asking, hey, I run a business, I could use some interpreters. And so she had kind of handed over the company, phone book, and given them access. So she was uh, distraught, when she realized this. So we had to kind of take it easy on her, but she was absolutely, furious that she had been used. So she was very quick to give up. Um, him and his friends. And so our first real mission was going out and, going after, those people. And it's, uh, within kind of like in police work, I guess you kind of shake the tree and, find the loose apples, and then you just use those to move your way up. So we really had to start from scratch and build a network of informants and people that would help us, but also build our own kind of tree of who's this bad guy, that bad guy. When we got there, the only really information that we were given was there were two deck of cards, of those 52. So these were pretty high level guys that the everyone in Iraq, all special operations forces in Iraq, were trying to find. And during our time there, we were able to capture both of those too. So through a lot of the work of the informants that we had, through the intelligence Marines that we had, and then it was really our job just to kind of do the it's called the finish, roll in the middle of the night, blow the door off, and grab them out of bed, hopefully.
Hmm. Did you find that the training, the workup was prepared you, or was there a lot to learn once you got in country?
There's always a lot to learn, and there's
Yeah.
always more to learn. But I think one of the things that because of the some of the situation that I talked about before, you were dealing with people who were all superbly trained and had gotten very accustomed to working with each other. One of the obvious questions I get all the time was, weren't you scared in combat? And yeah, of course you're scared, but it really takes on a whole different twist when you're working with people that are as well trained as you, and you know that they know exactly what to do in every at every given moment. So I've talked about it as like getting the point when kind of a light bulb comes on and you're like, hey, yeah, obviously I could get hit by a stray bullet. I could get I could be standing on a bomb and get blown up. But other than that, I'm very confident in our chances. This because combat really is a game of geometry, right? You have
Mm.
to not, figure out where people could shoot at you from, not be in those places, or point your weapon at the most likely place that bullets are going to come from. And so when you have a whole group of people who are all understand that and have that same geometric understanding it becomes all but the things that you can't account for are accounted for. So it really becomes a lopsided game,
Mm.
at that point.
Yeah, interesting. I know, obviously don't have any experience like that you have, but I know, people would ask me, what's it like being on a submarine, deployed and all that sort of thing. It was like it was never I never felt dangerous because of the people around me. The
Uh,
highly qualified operators everywhere you had, that knew, that were trained, and we drilled, and so you really felt like everybody had your back, right? And so
mhm,
there was a high level of positive peer pressure on a submarine to make sure that you were fully qualified and you were competent in what you
mhm.
did. And it was only 155 of us on a submarine, so we had to have each other's back because we operated alone. And so yeah, you're in these situations where, yeah, there's potential danger, but having capable people that have your back is a powerful feeling, I imagine.
Absolutely. And I think small teams anywhere, it really doesn't matter what like I said, I had the opportunity, the pleasure to be on subs and kind of watch, and you can see that it's a you know, a mechanism, right? It's not a bunch of individuals working. It's a cohesive unit working, and it's the same thing in a house. When you
Mm,
blow the door off, and you know what everybody's doing, you know that I don't have to worry about anybody coming down the stairs at me because somebody's already got that. I'm focused
mm,
on my job, and and I don't want to make light of it, or but it becomes semi-enjoyable. I mean, we would, and we got good at it because we did it a lot. I mean, almost every night we were out, and we were also there before the IEDs really proliferated. At the time we were there, it was mostly, somebody out in the field, pressing the trigger to blow the IED. Um, so we were, driving in vehicles with no doors, no armor, just because we hadn't reached that stage of the
mm,
war.
yeah.
But it was, we would come rolling in at 2 in the morning, and even though people would have early warning sentries posted on rooftops and things like that, we would drive with no lights on night vision goggles, flying down the road at 80 miles an hour in a 2 ton or 4 ton. I don't even know how much a Humvee weighs, but through the gate and into the door before anybody could, quite often, and in all of the well over 150 raids that we did, into homes. Um, I don't know how many times the person we were going after had a pistol or a rifle under their pillow or right beside them, and they weren't able to get to it in time. So there was
Mm.
real only one of those raids where we actually shot. I mean, we just had kind of figured out how to get in really really fast and overwhelm them with kind of violence of action and it's in most of these cases we wanted those people for the intelligence that they could provide.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so shooting them doesn't do a whole lot of good.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. You're not going to get much information then. So what did you learn about yourself through this whole experience?
I think the biggest thing through um, that time was that I suffered with not it, it's kind of a two-edged sword. On the one hand, almost crippling like imposter syndrome,
Mm,
and I've kind of always, and I talk about it in the book, and I've that's been the one aspect of the book that I've had so many people come up and say,
yeah.
"Man, either I didn't know it was called that, or I thought I was the only one that I'm like, so I really believe that unless you're a psycho, I mean, most of us have this in the back of our head that hey, at some point somebody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, man, you need to leave. You shouldn't be here. You're not qualified for this." But you have to kind of cover for that with a level of self-assuredness. And that sometimes feels very, very fake. And
Yeah.
I've come to find that that's, in leadership is particularly in newly kind of christened leaders, a lot of times in the military we are getting better at it, but in most, and I do some like coaching and things like that with people in various places in the business world. Your kind of first leadership position, in most cases, you get that position because you're good at the job.
Mm,
You don't, they're like, you're really good at doing this thing. You're going to be in charge of 5 or 8 or 12 people doing the same thing. And they don't give you any training in that. So you kind of have to assume this leadership mask that you put on and say, hey, I'm going to do the best I can at it until I figure it out. And I think that's the, realizing that everybody feels that way is a little bit comforting. So I think for me, I think that I learned that lesson, and then as I talked about a little bit before, that when you're working with a high performing team, your leadership style has to accommodate that. You've got to recognize that and let people give them as much leash as possible. So in the Marine Corps, we say, and I suspect it's probably service wide, that there are two responsibilities of leadership. The first is mission accomplishment, and the second is troop welfare. And people will debate, all day long about which is more important.
yeah.
And, I think it's, uh, there's a lot of people I see on social media that like your job as a leader is to raise up the people around you. Your job as a leader is to, no, your job as a leader is to get the job done first and
Mm,
foremost. You've got to do that. That's what you're hired for. That's what in the case of the military, that's what the nation expects of you. But the more you can prioritize, if you can prioritize troop welfare whenever you can, then generally speaking, they're going to take care of the mission, accomplishment. I
yeah.
think that sometimes the place that people get lost is thinking that troop welfare means, letting them go home, early every day or taking it easy on them, and that's a lesson that I had the good fortune to learn very early in my career from a pretty tough platoon sergeant and a tough team leader that good troop welfare is really really hard training. It's preparing you so that you're ready for whatever comes and you're going to come
Yeah.
back from it, right? And
Yeah.
be there to fight another day.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we had on an Ohio submarine, we have an O6 is a commanding officer, and my first commanding officer was a hard ass, and he drilled us and ran us hard, but it was a high level of like we were proud of who we were and what we could do, because we felt like there was nothing we couldn't do. you know. When
Mm.
we, when we went do torpedo shoots, we'd always hit, we never missed, we were just unstoppable. And I think there's a sense of morale that's associated with being the best, so being pushed and doing hard things, and you end up, feeling proud to be part of an elite team. So I think there's something there, that it's not just about, kicking your feet up and what have you, but it's about, being part of something special.
Yeah, and I think that particularly in the less in the military, I think that's more the norm.
Yeah.
But so, there's definitely a lot of people that I've worked with on kind of on the civilian side that you don't have that level of understanding when they're first put into a leadership position,
Yeah.
and sometimes, particularly, often the military will move you. It's not always the case in the civilian sector where today you're in charge of this team, and then yesterday you were one of the team, and you're not yet in with the upper level managers, but you're kind of stuck in limbo, and it's a tough position to be in. And I think simply by recognizing that, hey, let me, what can I do that's best for these, the people that are now under my charge in the long run, um, you'll probably make some pretty good decisions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So this has been a fantastic discussion, and it just listeners, I highly recommend you pick this book up, Tough, Rugged Bastards, and you're going to hear a lot more stories. We're really just kind of scratch the surface of it. But John, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Man, really that I think the one that writing the book has taught me two things. One is, being I'm a Marine. They say that we're like we eat crayons, right? We're not normally considered to be the sharpest, but if there's something that you want to do, you succeed at it by just chipping away at it. Commit to doing it. Clarify what it is that you want to accomplish. Commit to just making small steps to make it possible, and then. Really the thing, like I said, of the book is recognizing that everybody lives under the weight of this idea that they're not good enough. Um, this imposter syndrome, thinking that you shouldn't be there. So and I think there's value in that. I think that drives you to prove yourself every day. But I think also recognizing that you're not alone in that is kind of a relief as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great message. I know I struggle with it in myself in the nuclear submarine force. Like, what am I doing here? Do I really belong? Someone's going to tap me on the shoulder and tell them I don't belong here. So yeah, so I think, and I think high performers are like that, right? So they expect a lot out of themselves, and so I think the fact that you highlight that in the book, I think is good, so that people recognize that this is normal when
Mhm.
you're doing very difficult things and you're around really capable people. There's often a feeling like, oh, do I even belong here? And the truth of the matter is, you belong there, and
Yeah.
obviously, and your story is amazing. Um, wow. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. Again, listeners, the book is called Tough, Rugged Bastards. John, how can people find out more about you and the new book?
Absolutely. I have a website that's just Daily, Dailey.com. I'm most on LinkedIn, just under J.A. Daily and Instagram. That's kind of the big places. But yeah, please pick up a copy, and if you read it, let me know what you think.
Absolutely. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of John's resources. And again, pick this book up, Tough, Rugged Bastards. The link is in the show notes. And I've been on John's website. A lot of good information out there. I've been on his on Instagram too. He makes great videos. So if you want to understand or learn a little bit more about what he does, we didn't even talk about rucking and all the things you're into. But if you're into rucking and you're into fitness, John's got a lot of good content out there to help you along your journey there. So, John, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story, and thanks for writing this book so we can all get a chance to kind of look into the world that you lived in during, post 9/11 and getting out there in the war on global war on terror. So, thanks for what you did in the military. Thanks for writing this book.
John, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.